and Neighbor's Choice is live. I'm your host, David Gronowski. Welcome back to the program. We're broadcasting on radio, podcast, and video stream. And we're going to look at the news today like we always do. And that's what we're excited to have this time for. Here's a meme I saw that is interesting. It says, "Dear government, after a 47-year war on drugs, you can't keep drugs off the streets. You can't keep drugs out of elementary schools. You can't even keep drugs out of federal prisons. Yet you want me to disarm myself and trust that you can keep guns from criminals." That's a great point. That is kind of a summation of what a lot of people are thinking right now out there. Of course, the media doesn't want you to think that way. They want you to think always worshiping the state and everything you say and do. It's just one of those things where we have a weird moment in history where there's just so much lies. It's a joke. It's a cartoon. You know, it's become a self-parody. And it's one of those things that you can't even believe it's happening when it's happening. It's just surreal. It's surreal that people could be so dumb about things, that they can understand that we have evidence of a government that has failed the war on drugs. 47 years they've been doing it. They can't keep the drugs off the streets. They can't keep drugs out of elementary schools. They can't even keep drugs out of federal prison. But somehow a lot of people are ignorant enough and hateful enough, because it's based on hate. It's based on hating their neighbor's freedom more so than other things. They hate and they're afraid of their neighbor. They want their neighbor to worship the government like them. The leftist says, hey, why can't you just worship government the way we do? Government is there to take care of us, except for when they do a George Floyd thing. Then we want to defund the police. But every other time, they're very irrational, emotional, insanely ignorant groupthink here. Because it's just, nothing makes any coherence. They want us to disarm and let the governments take care to keep guns out of the hands of criminals. Even though we know that when you ban a gun, like AR-15, you got 15 million of them or so in the country, they're not going to go vanish into thin air. They're going to go underground. And so whenever you do a government ban, it doesn't make the thing go away, just like the drug war has proven. It makes the problem go underground. It makes it a lucrative thing for obscene, vicious, antisocial entities like drug cartels or criminal syndicates, which is what will happen with AR-15s. Right now, gangs sell guns that are already banned. AR-15s, if they're banned, would just be another gun on the gang menu, and they will have no problem selling those guns to disaffected, antisocial people. They'll have no problem. They don't care. They don't care. Just like government doesn't care. They just want power. But they spend a lot of time selling low information people on the notion that they truly, truly care beyond all belief. The same federal government whose failed 47-year war on drugs continues to destroy neighborhoods and destroy communities and pit people against each other based on race and income and other discriminatory stereotypes, is the same war on federal government that they failed on war on drugs and they fail on their war on cancer. They fail on their war on obesity. They fail on their war on poverty. They fail on their war on education. They just fail at everything they touch. But people are gullible enough and filled with hate enough that they'd rather have that good old-fashioned religion to navigate their life for them at all costs, as long as the right people who are administering it are in power. You talk to a leftist and they'll tell you, yeah, war on drugs, that's a problem. Then they go vote for Joe Biden, who did it for 50 years. They don't care. The television told them there's a villain. That's as much intelligence as they need to spend on it. Therefore, they're going to go hire Joe R. Biden. Same goes for the right. The right knows that, you know, when you ban guns, it doesn't make them go away. But yet they don't apply that same logic to drugs. And they don't apply that same logic to the hypocrisy of the war on drugs, in which the FDA pushes oxycodone and stuff like that with a revolving door relationship with the Purdue company that was behind the drug. There's just a lot of ignorant, misplaced trust and faith in the state all around us. Both sides have it. And we're in a situation where a lot of people are saying, are we going to finally get it? Or are we just going to keep shrinking and falling apart and collapsing in terms of our ability to logically think things through? 47 years, war on drugs. They haven't been able to keep the drugs out of the streets. They can't keep them out of our schools. And they even can't keep them out of the federal prisons. I remember that's what Detective John Beza told me in an interview a couple times. How can a government that can't keep drugs out of maximum security prisons keep drugs out of a free society? Stupid. Yet a lot of conservatives, including a lot of Trumpsters, believe in that. They really believe that. And it takes a lot of cognitive dissonance. If you want to look up the definition of statism, a good one is cognitive dissonance. It requires a tremendous amount of cognitive dissonance to maintain a belief in an all-powerful government to take care of us from cradle to grave for here, there, and everywhere. Because conservatives have their conceptions of supporting a nanny state. They don't do anything to really curtail government regulation. They don't have any critique for the FDA hardly. They don't do anything about the war on drugs. They don't do anything about the militarization of police. They don't do anything about the corruption in our justice system. They don't do anything about mandatory minimums. They don't do anything about the conspiracy law abuse, all that stuff. They just react once one of their guys gets in, the crosshairs of this injustice system. But they don't have a logical, proactive vision for how to deal with these things before they become problems worse and worse and worse. And the same for the left. It is not naive, nor is it niche to talk about things like this. This is the mainstream. I know without a shadow of a doubt that the mainstream of America understands what I'm talking about on this matter. They may have not thought it out exactly in a consistent, holistic approach, but they intuitively know that what I'm saying is right. That using the federal government to police us from ourselves, to keep us from having guns, to keep us from having drugs, to keep having the wrong nutrition, all the things that the federal government wants to be involved in our lives has failed utterly. They can't do it. It doesn't matter who you hire as president. It won't work ever. And as long as you keep making that assumption that it's going to continue to work in some way, we'll continue to have ridiculous intrusions like what we see in this pandemic political situation. So it's important that we get this stuff right. We get it right at the root. I'm David Gronowski. You're listening to a Neighbor's Choice radio show. You can call in at 727-587-1040. That's 727-587-1040. Drop us a comment on YouTube. Our YouTube video stream is at David Gronowski. Just search for that and watch us live if you want to drop a comment there. Or you can email me, hello@aneighborschoice.com. Back in just a second. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com. Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender. A Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Gronowski here. Angela Stanton King, who I've had on the program, she ran for Congress. She's a activist, conservative activist, African-American woman. She says, my daughter is 16 with a 4.5 GPA. She has her own car, her own office, her own bathroom, her own living quarters, and she just told me she's oppressed simply because she's black. I feel disrespected. WTH, are they teaching our children in school? And this goes to the principle of victimism that we talk about all the time on this program, that our society's tyrants depend on creating mental prisons for the rest of the population to feel powerless as victims. And the conservative response sometimes has been to be on the knee-jerk opposite, to say, oh, no, there's no oppression going on. There's no rigging of the system.
But that's not a proper response. That's inaccurate. There is a lot of rigged stuff in our system. There is a lot. But the question is, how do you fix it? Do you fix it by having the corrupt monopoly bureaucrats of Washington, D.C. have more power? No, you don't. That would be very dumb, as we've talked about in many different ways. What do? How do you fix it? You have to get to the heart of the matter. The question at the heart of the state is it okay to sacrifice your neighbor for your benefit? Do you have a right to initiate violence against your neighbor, to sacrifice them, to sacrifice their freedoms, to sacrifice their liberty, to sacrifice their body, to sacrifice their finances by confiscating their money through the state? Do you have a right to do that to your neighbor? Now, for my principles, when I look at stuff like God desires mercy, not sacrifice, that's what Jesus says. And when I hear people say in the Bible, do not resist evil with violence, that's what Jesus says too. When I hear those things, it makes me think from my worldview that I don't understand how you can justify using violence when the person you're saying that you want to imitate says don't use violence. But you have to have a kind of a look in the mirror to get to that point. To get to the point where you can deconstruct the violence of government. I think increasingly in this time, it's much easier to see the violence of government when they are rolling out proposals like health passports and government taking care of your college and government taking care of your health care and government taking care of your energy, just running the whole show everywhere. And you continue to see that all around us. You see this story here in the Washington Post. Greg Sargent says the GOP war on voting takes an ugly new turn. And it's talking about the Georgia law that was passed. And I don't know the particulars of the Georgia law. I can't speak on it in detail. But there's a new call of what's not new, but it's just they don't want to have any accountability with voting. And I think it's interesting because you can do more damage to human bodies with a vote, with one vote, than you can with any gun. Yet they want to have total control over guns, but they don't want to have any accountability for one of the most dangerous things you could possibly do, which is to vote for tyrannical stuff to happen. There's no skin in the game. Whoever hires Biden, who will put people away for nonviolent crimes, who will destroy businesses, destroy jobs, loot the public for giant corporations' benefit, destroy your business with regulations, sanction people and starve people all over the globe for whoever special interests need that done. Whoever votes for them, they don't have any legal liability for whatever they send that disgusting administration off to do. No, they get to wash their hands. They hire someone, they do horrible things on their behalf like they said they would. And do the people who get injured, do the people who get bombed by Biden immorally, illegally, unconstitutionally around the world, do they get to say, hey, I'm going to sue the voters? No, they don't get to. It's the opposite of skin in the game. Democracy is the opposite of skin in the game. It's the consecration of chaos. It's an attack on every individual person. To say that the majority gets to have total domination over anybody else? Do they get to loot and bomb and sanction and pillage people's businesses and industries? No. That's not real. That's not the way it's supposed to be. We have to have a society that has some common sense. We have to get to a place where we can have sanity again in the way we think, in the way we talk, in the way we deal with issues. We've become morally bankrupt with almost everything we see around us. It's just total ridiculousness. The woke stuff is all a distraction, wasting our time on ways to point fingers at our neighbors rather than working together to stop the systemic oppression that is taking place against all of us. It's time to have a reality check. It's time to get on to the business of making our world a better place. I saw this parody tweet from Joseph Stalin. It says, "We would like to stress that the vaccination passport is just a temporary measure. Later on, it will be replaced with a full social credit system to encourage all kinds of correct behavior." And as I like to point out, Uncle Joe always had a bigger house than all the other comrades, didn't he? People like, they want to believe in fantasy. They want to be lied to. The average person who wants socialism and corporatism and all this stuff, do they actually believe their stuff? I don't know. It's hard to explain how humans are. They'll lie to themselves at the same times they know they're lying, and yet they kind of convince themselves that it's true, but yet they still know they're lying. It's very bizarre what human beings do. They have so much inconsistency that you have to wonder how people get themselves through the day with all the pretzels they put themselves in. It's like, for example, the left has always been, it's been something that's been talked about in Democratic circles for some time, that they should be skeptical of big pharma. Big pharmaceutical companies are dangerous. And you can do CBS story after CBS story and NBC story of all these times in which the giant pharmaceutical companies got caught taking advantage of consumers for this thing or that thing. But now these same companies are just magically brought back as good guys now with this health passport nonsense. Now they're just magically squeaky clean perfect. Come on. It's just like George W. Bush. He was the biggest villain of all for the media. Now he's brought back in the new plot line. He's a good guy. It's like, what is this pro wrestling stupidity? It's so ridiculous. Back in a second.
Find the best coverage of Florida sports all in one place.
SportsTalkFlorida.com covers all the Florida teams you know and love, with in-depth interviews, original coverage, and insight on the team that makes the news in Florida.
Whether it's the Bucks, Lightning, Rays, Jags, Dolphins, Marlins,
Sports Talk Florida has got you covered.
or any of our college teams like the Knowles, Gators, Bulls, Canes, or Knights, you can find it all at SportsTalkFlorida.com.
Sports Talk Florida has got you covered. SportsTalkFlorida.com.
Testimony in the murder trial of Derek Chauvin, the ex-Minneapolis cop charged in George Floyd's death. Paramedic Derek Smith said when he arrived on the scene,
in a living person, there should be a pulse there. I did not feel one. I suspected this patient to be dead.
Jurors also hearing other first responders and Floyd's girlfriend. The Biden administration is planning a months-long pressure campaign on Republicans and some Democrats to support the president's infrastructure plan. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
We want to see progress by Memorial Day. We'd like to see this package passed by the summer, but I certainly expect when Congress returns that the president will be inviting members to the Oval Office.
Colorado lawmakers are considering a proposal to ban Native American mascots in public schools and colleges. One representative says nearly 24 Colorado schools have mascots like the Warriors, Reds, and Savages. Baseball opening day, the Mets-Nationals game postponed. A D.C. player tested positive for COVID. Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
A commenter on our YouTube stream says, if people take away your privacy, property rights, freedom, and etc., what do you think is the most effective recourse before resorting to violence? Well, when you resort to violence, you basically are endorsing and surrendering the entire deal back to statists, because statists worship state violence. And so when you do violence back, it mirrors and justifies their frame of reality. I believe there's a place for self-defense, but in terms of proactive, preemptive violence, I don't see there's ever a place for that. But that's something that people have been debating for a long time, haven't they? When, you know, and they always want to, you know, you take Jesus' words when he says, those who live by the sword die by the sword. And they want to always say, well, he was only meaning it in that moment. You know, Peter was trying to defend himself. He needed to let the plan of the bad guys go forward. So he's like, yeah, in general, those who live by the sword die by the sword, but just for this time is what I mean that by. I don't mean that that has nothing to do with anything, because the idea that he was trying to save the world had no, like, think about this for a second. So basically Peter is trying to stop the plan that Jesus has to save the world. So when Peter is rebuked for doing that, Jesus, you know, says those who live by the sword die by the sword. But the way people want to get out of that having any impact into their love of violence is by saying, oh, that only had to do with that particular mission. But that particular mission was about how to save the world. You see? How to save the world. And then Peter himself, later on, when he's talking about what happened with Jesus's mission, he says the kings of the earth were joined together against him. Now, all the kings of the world were not physically, literally there. It's symbolic for what was going on and how Jesus was coming to save the world by exposing the way human beings create governments based on collective violence and cultures based on sacrifice, and helping us understand how to get out of that. That's what it means to save the world. There's more to it than that, but that's a huge, huge, massive part of it, isn't it? So the text is pretty clear to me that those who live by the sword die by the sword has something to do with how do you want to save the world? How do you want to make the world a better place? Well, I'm going to make the world a better place the way I'm doing it, Jesus says, and it's not going to be done with force. So if he doesn't use force to make the world a better place and to save the world in his moment, then how can you use force to deal with the ugliness all around him? I mean, Jesus's people were going through a lot of mess. They were going through a lot of oppression, a lot of corruption. Wasn't he at a point when your people are being assaulted, people are being raped, people are being pillaged? Wasn't he at the point where he should have been able to pick up the sword by that point, by our standards of self-defense, the way we like to use self-defense and abuse that concept and take it further than it needs to be, right? Wouldn't he be within his rights at that point to start using self-defense and get some swords and start going ninja? It seems to me he had plenty of justification from our standards of what justice looks like to go ahead and start doing that, right? But he didn't. He said, those who live by the sword die by the sword. So I take that to mean that if in his mission to save the world, if that was such an important mission, which has everything to do with what we're a part of today by making the world more free and more beautiful and freeing people from pain and unnecessary diseases and unnecessary tyrannical policies and all these different things, that we're supposed to continue that project of saving the world, that we take up our cross, we challenge the toxic crowd spirit of our time, and we show the example that we must show to change the world. And that means nonviolence. I do believe there's a place for self-defense. If your house is being attacked by horrible people trying to hurt your family, you have a right to restrain them and stop the attack. I mean, that's obvious to me. That has nothing to do with this, which is about how do you deal with systemic evil? How do you deal with systemic corruption? How do you deal with systemic abuse? And in that case, self-defense doesn't really scale the same way, because you're dealing with massive empires and armies and nuclear bombs and all kinds of elaborate stuff that doesn't respond to the same thing as, say, somebody coming in and trying to kill your family and you grabbing the person. It doesn't quite scale when you go through the whole process all the way up to a national situation. So I think it's one of those things that we just have to be mindful of, that mentality creeping up into our mindset today, that vengeance mentality, that tit for tat mentality. Doesn't help anybody. Yes, we have a lot of corruption, but embracing it by responding with the same force is not necessarily going to solve any problems, in my opinion. To me, we have to go a little bit better than that. We have to go a little deeper than that. So what are some other things you could do? That was the question. Well, I think one of the things you can do, of course, is to practice what you preach. Do whatever you can to get you and your friends' kids out of government schools. Do whatever you can to not be leveraged by debt. Do whatever you can to not be leveraged by your career choice, so that you have to work for some ridiculous corporation that rules your life so much so that you can't say the truth about anything without fear of being fired or whatever. Be smart. Be loving. Be a coach for people around you. Coach them through their thoughts that are filled with despair. Coach them through their debt. Help them get out of it or declare bankruptcy, which is based on a Jubilee principle of having forgiveness of debts. If we had honest money, maybe you'd have more of a strong case for encouraging people to pay off all their consumer debt. But when the consumer debt is created based on a violent, lawless disregard for the rule of law of our own land, it's a little different. They create money out of thin air. They create an interest rate for the banks that you don't get to have. Then the banks get to have fractional reserve banking, where they get to loan out $90 for every $10 they have, or even I think less than that. They have to have on reserve. This is stuff that is not based on free markets. That's not based on private property. That's not based on common law and honest business. That's a rigged situation. And that's something that we should be very skeptical about. And that means you have to work within that system. But I don't believe that if people have a massive amount of consumer debt, why do you need to be in the credit system? Who do you need to get your approval from? You can be very, very successful. You can be if you want to be a millionaire, you can be a millionaire without even having a credit score. That's not impossible. Who tells you that you have to have consumer debt to become very successful in your life? So I think that's a big principle that I want to continue to help people see in their life. Because when you're not surrounded by constant pressures to tap out and settle for safe mediocrity, then you're able to have more freedom to say what you need to say. Less shackles, more freedom and courage, and more joy. So get rid of your shackles that you're voluntarily keeping yourself in. Stay out of the debt. Pay it off if it's something that you can manage within a reasonable time, or declare bankruptcy and stay out of the credit system. It doesn't matter. You can still become a millionaire even if you do that. If that's what you want. I don't care about whether you want to be a millionaire or not. I'm just saying it to make the point. People think they've been taught by the creditor-based society that we have that, you don't want to declare bankruptcy, then you're shameful. And I understand the wisdom behind that, but again, we don't have a honest money system. We have credit created out of thin air. We don't have credit based on savings in an economy. That's where real credit comes from. It comes from savings in the economy, deferred consumption in the economy that allows other people to say, hey, okay, someone saved this and we're going to use this to loan out credit. But we don't have that. We have money created out of thin air at your expense. And then you're told to swill it the rest of your life paying off interest on money that is owed to companies that got the money printed out of thin air in the first place at your expense. It doesn't make any sense. That's not an honest system. That's not a lawful system. That's a lawless system. That's a lawless system. And we just have to be able to help our neighbors free themselves from the shackles that they've voluntarily keep themselves in. A commenter on Twitter named Chastity said, my mom received her first COVID shot at 4 p.m. last Friday. Exactly 24 hours later, she was in an ambulance with a 105-degree fever, shaking uncontrollably, vomiting nonstop, and said she thought she was going to die. The doctor told her it was a reaction to the vaccine and happens sometimes. Now, I say that not to say good or bad towards the vaccine. I say that because I am tired of these outlets trying to censor what is a normal human thing, which is when you're in a time of crisis and you have experimental drugs that have legal immunity and no approval from the FDA and so forth, that you have to have the right to have conversations with your neighbor and be able to, gauge what's happening anecdotally from other people so that you can make an informed decision about your life. And the bigots at Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and all the media outlets don't want you to have that. They don't think that you're deserving of that. They think they own your life. Martin Kulldorff, who is a person of great scientific background, credibility, he got a flag on his Twitter page. The tweets, they said it's as misleading. They put a big warning symbol on it for this statement. He's pro-vaccine. He's pro the stuff. But here's what he said. Someone asked him, Dr. Kulldorff, do you think younger age groups and or people who already had the virus need to be vaccinated? I am not an anti-vaxxer, but I am vaccine hesitant about this one. It seems to be a religious mantra now that everyone must be vaccinated. And he said, no, thinking that everyone must be vaccinated is as scientifically flawed as thinking that nobody should. COVID vaccines are important for older, high-risk people and their caretakers. Those with prior natural infection do not need it, nor children. And because of that mild disagreement, Twitter had to put a big warning symbol and flag it and all this stuff. Bigots do not allow for any mild deviation from their groupthink hive mind possession. You must submit to their herd or you will not be heard. He's a professor at Harvard Medical School. He studies disease surveillance methods, infectious disease outbreaks, vaccine safety. Looking at his Twitter page. And, they cannot have any kind of deviation. It must be 100% conformity to their groupthink. Very sheep-like. He says on Twitter 6 hours ago, with Twitter censoring people espousing long-standing basic principles of public health, you may also follow me on LinkedIn. Martin Kulldorff. So, he's not an anti-vaxxer. He's pro-vaccine. And they still won't even allow someone who's just saying, hey, this is good for people who, this should be taken only for elderly, not for young and people who've already had the disease. But the nutcases who are quacks, they can't handle that. They can't handle that. No, the babies need it too, is what they're saying. So we're going to flag your posts, Mr. Harvard scientist who knows a lot about this stuff. No. You're not speaking into the groupthink mantra, so you have to be silenced. This is so stupid. People are tired of this stuff. I think this is going to be a big overreach that will open up millions and millions of people to an understanding of what kind of insane, idiotic stuff we're dealing with from media and government bureaucracies. We'll take a break and return in just a moment. I'm David Granosky, your host. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice, and you can call in at 727-587-1040. David Granosky here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. Hello, this is David Granosky with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. Commenter says, think locally, act locally, as Brian McHenahan says. I don't know that name, but yeah, I mean, the idea of thinking locally and acting locally is a good principle. And it's kind of consistent and similar to the principle of subsidiarity. I don't know if someone just died or what that noise was. But what we're dealing with is an imperial mindset where everything has to be busybody. Everything has to be based on busybody micromanagement. And that's not going to help anybody. That's not going to help anybody with their life. Busybody micromanagers, they don't help anybody. So let's go to the phones. We have Ryan from Orlando. How you doing, Ryan? Ryan, you're on air. How's it going? Okay, I don't think he's able to hear, so we'll go to somebody else. Disavowed Podcast comments. He says, most of our problems are not local. Well, that's an interesting statement. I agree that there's certainly most of the problems seem to be from the micromanagers from DC and globalist institutions. But there is something local about the human tendency to want to harass and attack people. I mean, just in my own life, I've seen the most Nazi, fascist, idiotic, brain-dead behavior you can imagine from an HOA. You know? Just totally stupid. Just the thing, not even just with me, just seeing what they do to other people. Just stupid, idiotic, soulless, lifeless, dead idiocy. And you'd say, you know, for something so petty, people will do anything to have control over their neighbor when the stakes are so low. So when you have government involved, you can imagine how it gets even worse. But it makes an interesting question that, you know, it's not that government causes people to be this way. It does certainly exacerbate the tendency to have busybody meddling in our lives. But there's something intrinsic in a lot of human beings just all around the corner, everywhere you look, that they would love to delightfully be a little nasty, petty tyrant in your life, just for the hell of it. They have nothing else to do. There is a sadistic side to people that I think is a lot closer to home than we want to be aware of, you know? rats, little wannabe, little silent, little Stalins that are incompetent idiots with miserable, boring lives are all around us. And they just want to have an opportunity to take advantage of being able to hurt you and harm you just to make themselves feel like they matter. They have God complexes or bad relationships from their childhood or whatever. They're just brats. But it doesn't have to be some kind of psychoanalysis to it. It's just brat jerks. And they're everywhere. And they want to control you. They want to control how tall your, mailbox is. They want to control what you do with your life, what you do with the color of your door. Anything that you can imagine. They want to be involved. They want to steal your money if you don't obey them. And they love it because they have nothing else going on in their life. There's a lot of people like that. And that's why COVID has brought a lot of those people out. It's brought a lot of those people out. And it's something that we have to be mindful of and be aware of, that even if you shrink government and you become closer to home, that you will still find tyrants all around you, including in your own heart, because we all have the tendency to fall into evil, even if we don't really have that particular evil of being a busybody, little fascist, we can still be drawn to evil in different ways as well. So this has been an interesting time because it's really allowed people to have an opportunity to peek under the hood of humanity, if you will, and see what's really making us tick. What's really causing us to do the things that we do. And I hope we take this time to really grow and evolve and develop a better society in the future. We have an opportunity to do something that would be tremendously beautiful. To have decentralism, to have localism, to have more nonviolence, to have better art, to have decentralized music, decentralized movie making, decentralized media, news making, all these things. We have a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. But we have to be vigilant in preserving our liberties. We have to be bold in speaking out for what's true. And we have to continue to not have any doubt about the message of nonviolence, the message of creativity, of innovation. We can have anti-gravity flying cars. We can have elemental transmutation at low temperature. We can have nuclear energy at room temperature. We can have, cures for these big diseases. And many of these things are right under our noses. And that's the stuff that I'm going to continue to talk about. And I can't talk about the details of them every day because these things are being investigated and researched as we speak. We've had nuclear scientists doing the things I'm talking about on this show. We've had scientists doing stuff with medicine and diseases on this show, but I can't, I'm going to keep talking about it in the big picture, but I can't give out the specifics every day because these things take time. They're an evolving process. But you can rest assured that A Neighbor's Choice will be your go-to place to learn about those secrets of nature, those secrets of medicine, and understanding physics. You can rest assured that we're going to be the place at the tip of the spear to bring this stuff as it happens to you. We have the scientists, we have the researchers in our Rolodex, and we'll continue to bring the information as it develops. You're not going to hear that it's anywhere else because we have been doing the research that nobody else wants to do, guided by the principles that we espouse. We'll take a break and return with Science and You, but for now, Godspeed.
News, talk, and information. 1040 WHBO Pinellas Park, Tampa Bay's all new News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
From ABC News, I'm Chuck Severson. At the trial of Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer accused of murder, a witness's unanswered question.
The jury heard from the scene. Derek Smith was one of those, and he made it clear that he thought Floyd was dead when he arrived. He said no medical attention was given to Floyd prior to the ambulance arriving.
When I arrived on scene, there was no medical services being provided to the patient.
He said he does not know why the officers did not attempt chest compressions on Floyd. Mark Remillard, ABC News.
President Biden at his first cabinet meeting promoting his big infrastructure package.
Working with my team here in the White House, these cabinet members will represent me in dealing with Congress engage the public in selling the plan, and help work out the details as we refine it and move forward.
Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell.
I'm going to fight them every step of the way because I think this is the wrong prescription for America.
The bill would repair and upgrade roads, bridges, airports, train terminals, expand broadband access. To pay for it, higher taxes on big corporations and the wealthy. Update on the Orange, California office shooting, leaving 4 dead. Police Lieutenant Jennifer Amat says the alleged gunman knew his targets.
An adult female who had also been shot was found with the boy. Officers immediately rendered aid to her. That female victim, along with the suspect, were each transported to a local hospital where they both remain in critical but stable condition.
Jobs snapshot, ABC's Jim Ryan.
Economists were hoping that the decline that was reported last week would be a trend, not an anomaly. But the seasonally adjusted weekly claims for unemployment benefits rose by about 61,000 last week to 719,000. On the upside, the 4-week moving average for claims continues to fall, giving economists new hope that the country is returning to pre-pandemic employment levels.
You're listening to ABC News.
Do you check your Google search results regularly? You should. People often get their first impression of you or your business online. Negative comments on the internet can impact your life and your livelihood. Take control of your online reputation. Get your free reputation report card at reputationdefender.com. It may reveal negative posts from an ex-employee, upset patient or client, news article, legal issue, or even exposed personal information right there in your Google search results. Uncover what's lurking on the internet about you with reputationdefender.com's patented scan and get your free reputation report card. Or for immediate assistance with your reputation, call 800-401-6681. Our cutting-edge technology helps make your Google search results look their best. Call 800-401-6681. That's 800-401-6681. 800-401-6681. Or take the free scan at reputationdefender.com.
New calls for baseball to boycott Georgia.
President Biden telling ESPN he supports the push to move Major League Baseball's All-Star game out of Atlanta in response to Georgia's divisive new election law.
I would strongly support them doing that.
Voting rights activists from a broad coalition have ramped up their pressure campaign targeting Georgia-based businesses, some even calling for boycotts. Karen Travers, ABC News, Washington.
A top state court says the statues can come down.
Members of white supremacist and neo-Nazi groups rallied in Charlottesville in order to save statues of Confederate generals Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson. That happened in 2017. The resulting violence killed one woman and injured many others. Now, Virginia Supreme Court ruling they can remove both statues, and that an outdated law that prevents disturbing war memorials did not apply. Andy Field, ABC News.
Joining a growing list of older Americans and musicians who have recently sold their music catalog, singer-songwriter Paul Simon, selling all his songs to Sony Music. Simon's 79, no word on the sale price. While the airline business hasn't fully recovered, all Nippon Airways trying to increase revenue by serving luxury meals usually offered on board on grounded planes. Passengers or diners can choose Japanese or Western-style meals. A first-class meal costs $540. Business class meals, $270. This is ABC News.
The border is in crisis. President Trump secured the border, but Biden is spending $86 million on hotel rooms for migrants. Now, Grant Stinchfield investigates Biden's executive orders and dangerous policies. Watch Stinchfield on Newsmax TV tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern as he reveals the dangers. Find Newsmax TV on all major cable systems or get it free on Roku, YouTube, Xumo, Pluto, and smart TVs. Plus, download the free Newsmax app on your phone. Help protect our border. Watch Newsmax TV's Stinchfield tonight.
Chuck Severson, ABC News.
Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
each and every day we have politics and culture on our show. But for today, it's Thursday, which means we're going to do Science and You. That's where we talk about physics and chemistry. We talk about all kinds of science-related topics. And to do so, we have with us our Chief Science Advisor, Dr. Yu. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for coming. Let's look at some of the stories here today. You said here the story in Yahoo News is interesting. Japanese scientists discover a way to help regrow teeth. Research findings by Japanese scientists reportedly open up the possibility of a new drug that could help regenerate lost teeth in humans. Researchers at Kyoto University and University of Fukui have found in animal studies that suppressing the uterine sensitization-associated gene can efficiently lead to tooth growth. So what's going on here in this story?
Well, I think this is exciting news for many people, in my age group. So when you have a teeth problem, there's a very, especially for people who are getting retired or something, you find your life, basically eating becomes so difficult. So now the new drug, which has been successfully in animal study, and find out that, we can, by suppressing certain things and with the drug, and suddenly we find that there's a stimulus, a growth of teeth in mice. So, and this could be soon could be used in human study, and so we already had some human phenomenon. Find out someone has more teeth or have less teeth than started than a normal number of teeth, and we find humans do have those kind of phenomenon. So if we can successfully apply this new drug, and we could have help human to grow teeth and make people in their retirement age and make their lives have high quality life.
That's very interesting. Let's look at this other story here that you pointed out. It's in Yahoo Finance. It says the radioactive diamond battery that will run for 28,000 years. It's a startup. NDB is making a 28,000-year battery. The battery is powered by nuclear waste with energy extracted by diamonds. The battery is costly and fussy, but it could power devices for many years at a time. What's this all about? What's this technology?
This technology, make me excited is, number one, it uses the waste, nuclear waste, to get a graphite, those radioactive material from a nuclear waste. So we can recycle nuclear waste. And those nuclear waste has a radioactive properties. So that means it has energy. It can generate heat and electricity. So now, number one, we can recycle something is waste and to be something useful. And the even more cooler things is this one, if we build as a battery, it can last for 28,000 years because the radioactive, the decay, the half-life, the decay just take that long. So if this one, you may remember, the audience may remember, we talked about the last year, like 8 months ago or something last year. So they were talking about, there's a potential of application of this kind of technology. But this article talking about it could be available to buy in 2 years. That means, so if we can have this kind of battery, so we never need a rechargeable battery anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting that there's so much possible alternative batteries out there that people don't even think about. What is the one that you're most interested in? I think we've talked about it before, but do you think that batteries are going to be the key to clean energy in the future, or do you think it's going to be something else that's more interesting?
It's not, the battery technology is important. So now we have electrical vehicle, highly depends on battery. Battery basically is a storage for electricity. It can store electricity, right? So far all the kind of battery available is highly corrosive and hazardous to human body, include this called the nuclear powered nano battery, using nuclear waste. If it's radioactive, so could somehow, have hazardous. So in my my favorite the source to generate energy, actually, it's something like a 24/7 24/7 solar panel type of. Some material, we do have successfully this kind of demonstration. And some material, after certain process, it can generate the electricity constantly, under the sun or in the night, so without the sun. So basically, it is somehow the solar panel, but it function without exposed to the sun. And I believe that will be a clean and available everywhere on Earth, right? And also, it's readily available to anybody. So I believe that's one of the future for us.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to explore, and I wonder, how these things will, get treated by the press. It seems like you don't hear about these types of energy technologies. Everybody seems to be talking about wind farms and solar panels as the only real thing to support for clean energy,
That's right. So, the main, the main institution, they try to study to study something, create a huge power and something. But then right now, with this kind of a trend, this kind of instead of use a power plant to generate the energy, we found a solar panel can generate the energy for any individual house, right? So this decentralized, the power generating device, and it's more efficient, and you can carry them with you, but they may not be a huge, money maker for institution. Institution will get the most money from government. The government, dealing with a huge plant, like a nuclear, power plant or some kind of things. So, in the future, this trend could be changed with commercial demand getting up.
Look at this story in physics.org. It says physicists observe new phase in Bose-Einstein condensate of light particles. It says about 10 years ago, researchers at the University of Bonn produced an extreme aggregate photon state, a single superphoton made up of many thousands of individual light particles, and presented a completely new light source. The state is called an optical Bose-Einstein condensate and has captivated many physicists ever since because this exotic world of light particles is home to its very own physical phenomena. Researchers led by Professor Weitz, who discovered the superphoton, and theoretical physicist Professor Kroha now report a new observation, a so-called overdamped phase, a previously unknown phase transition within the optical Bose-Einstein condensate. The study has been published in the journal Science. It's an extreme physical state that usually only occurs at very low temperatures. The particles in this system are no longer distinguishable and are predominantly in the same quantum mechanical state. In other words, they behave like a giant superparticle. The state can therefore be described by a single wave function. What is this about? I'm sure people listening are like, I don't understand anything about what's being said here,
Well, so these are using some kind of basic fundamental, concept in quantum mechanics. Different type of the state, and this is a wave particles. This is the photons combined with somehow light particles. I do not believe the fundamental theory is understandable and is true. I do not believe it. But however, some phenomenon, that they study, regardless of what their theory is. But if they do observe, they use this kind of called a super, photon particle. If they can generate some effective lights, until then, they may have some kind of application. But so far, the theoretical value, I do not see it has any, it goes anywhere.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to see, but I don't know. A lot of these things, it seems like it's not really based in reality, is it? Or I don't know. I guess they wouldn't want us to say that, would they?
Yes. If you think if you ask them a question, they will tell you, we don't even clear what it is. If you ask enough, so they will tell you they don't even understand what they're talking about, really. So that happens to so many things, because the reason, in fundamental term, nobody fully understand what quantum mechanics is. The reason is, if you look at all the spectrum, within the quantum mechanics realm, it's a self-contradiction, the lack of fundamental logical connection between them. So that means if something does not even make logical sense and does not even make a physical sense, so that's something wrong. And actually, I do believe the fundamental concept in quantum mechanics is fundamentally wrong. They don't have the so-called quantum particles. Those kind of, it can, it cannot move in space and time continuously. It can only jump from one orbit to another orbit without physically go through the space and the time. So this kind of material this kind of particle does not exist. So that's why, the explanation has a problem with this kind of super photon.
You're listening to Science in You, our science segment on A Neighbor's Choice. We'll continue in just a moment with more science headlines with physicist Dr. Yu. Back in a second. Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187, Equal Housing Lender.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you, Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office.
Help pay holiday bills. With qualifying insurance, we'll come to you with mobile service. With a new windshield and New Year's cash from Auto Glass America. 813-96-GLASS. 813-96-GLASS.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. We're here with Dr. Yu, our science advisor. Dr. Yu, what else is going on in the science world that we should be concerned with this week? Anything else that comes to mind?
Do you have or does your audience have any questions?
We can open that up for comments here online. If you have a physics question, you can drop a comment here on our YouTube stream or audio stream. I don't know why they're playing our introduction music. Why would you play the intro music right now? But it's an interesting day today. We have a lot of different topics that we've covered on this show. So one of the things that I think is important for people is to know that one of the things that I would ask you to remind people about is people think that physics, for example, is not approachable, that it's got a lot of math and everything, that it takes extreme genius to be able to understand. And you've talked about this topic a lot, so perhaps you could use this time to explain your answer to that challenge.
Yes, I wanted to explain the reason we get the impression and physics is incomprehensible to average Jew, to average people. The reason is if you ask the leading physicists in the world now, if you ask them deep enough, you find out they don't understand how the universe works themselves. The reason is we got something fundamentally wrong with our physics textbook and theories. We had a lot of success in application of technology. However, we lack of fundamental understanding of the real world. So that's why it becomes so confusing to people outside of and even inside and outside of the physical major. And I want to explain, in reality, physics is dealing with the most fundamental force, particles, or the laws. The most fundamental, that means exists in every single thing that we touch, every single part of our body. So our intuition, so if you think about it, something should be very intuitive to people, nothing more than just physics. And on top of that will be all reaction, chemical reaction, or biology, born out of foundation of physics and chemistry. And is because we do not the physicist, because the physicist does so many mathematical equations, symbols. Normal people do not even know what definition of them. So that's why they cannot use their judgment to say, are you really understand or not understand? Because they coded with this codes. Only the people in the field understand what they're talking about. But if you really, let other people to understand, use the language, everybody understand that you were surprised to find out, right? So the so-called leading physicist actually knows very little or almost nothing about how real world works.
Yeah, it's a strange thing because that's very heretical for you to say that as a physicist yourself. You're not supposed to say that, but it's.
You're right.
Yeah.
For this program, so that's because you provided the platform. Is try to open mind instead of jump out of those herd mentality, right? So this is group thinking. And anytime the group thinking is only compromise the accuracy and the truth, and the compromise with the majority's opinion. And often majority opinion is not based on the truth, it's most of the based on the beliefs. So that's why for people outside of the field believe, oh, expert knows. However, ask expert tell you wrong thing and the people, and take you something very confusing. So people think about, oh, physics is so difficult. To be simple, for everybody to understand, the universe is only have one particle made by, everything made by one single particle. It's just magnetic particle. And the universe only have one fundamental force. It's a magnetic force. And all the fundamental forces, gravity, electromagnetic, electrical force, magnetic force, and the nuclear force, some strong or weak nuclear force, they are all manifestation of magnetic force. So if you understand this one, so-called electron, protons, and the neutrons, all of them are made by just one particle, magnetic particles. The universe is actually just that simple.
So how long will it take this thesis to kind of make its way into physics, or is physics going to try to double down on some of the old paradigms for decades more? What do you think?
Good question. You cannot changing the current textbook in this year, right? You cannot changing the textbook because either we're affect so many people's livelihood. They're teaching something wrong, they're reading wrong. However, I believe in 1 or 2 generations. I mean, talking about the young people come out, maybe in 20 or less than 40 years. And the people would understand, oh, okay. Or even faster, in a couple years, people might realize the universe is so simple. Everything we do is not only comprehensible, actually we can test it ourselves.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting, and we're going to continue to investigate this because it has tremendous opportunity for exploration for things that could help make the world a better place if we have a better understanding of how it works. So it's always a pleasure speaking with you, Dr. Yu.
Thank you.
And if you want to see more episodes of Science and You and learn about physics and chemistry and everything with a fresh perspective, rooted in logic and truth and evidence, go to aneighborschoice.com and search for Science and You. We'll see you in just a moment.
Politics these days are just that, politics. Pathetic discussions about things that don't matter, while the pandemic, crime, and economic disparity march on. That's why you need a balanced approach to news, business, and entertainment in the state of Florida. That publication is newstalkflorida.com. Whether it's the White House, the courthouse, or your neighbor's house, News Talk Florida has the sources, articles, video, and audio that will be a must daily check-in from your laptop or mobile device. Take a look at newstalkflorida.com. Today's news and entertainment with a Florida slant.
2 first responders testifying today in the trial of Derek Chauvin. Hennepin County paramedic Derek Smith, who transported George Floyd from the scene on when he arrived.
In a living person, there should be a pulse there. I did not feel one. I suspected this patient to be dead.
The former Minneapolis police officer seen on video pinning Floyd to the ground with his knee pleaded not guilty to murder and manslaughter charges. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says the economy can't afford the higher taxes and more borrowing to pay for President Biden's infrastructure plan.
I'm going to fight them every step of the way because I think this is the wrong prescription for America.
The White House expects the more than $2 trillion plan to work its way through Congress by Memorial Day and to be passed over the summer. At least 4 people are dead, including a 9-year-old boy in what authorities in Orange, California are calling a targeted attack. A tech rally pushed the S&P 500 past the 4,000 mark for the first time today. Daria Albinger, ABC News.
Do we have Jeff Deist with us?
Yes. Hello, David. Good to talk to you.
Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. And I wanted to ask you right off the bat, the big topic that's been blowing up all over social media this week, and a lot of people have been saying it's going to come, and here it is, which is this notion that we need to have a health passport. Joe Biden's administration is working on stuff. They're going to try to have a lot of private companies do it so they can hide behind that. And, you know, a lot of people are saying this is why, you know, rigid, obsession with respecting private property and private companies and all this is just leads to this kind of stuff. But other people say, no, that's not what we should take from this debate. And it's been a point that, you know, Libertarian Party has been getting some flack for not speaking out, I guess, more directly against health passports. So what's your overall take of what's going on here?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting how this issue came up out of nowhere. I mean, the Biden administration has floated it. There isn't much detail in terms of what it might actually look like legislatively, or whether it could even happen privately or ostensibly privately. But, you know, this is a very different animal in terms of a proposal than what we've seen. People have pointed out, hey, you need certain vaccines oftentimes to attend public school. You need to have proof of that from your doctor. Or there have been vaccines required for international travel in the past. So people point these out, David, as reasons for why this is nothing new. But it is something new, because now we're talking about to really lead your daily life right here at home, domestically, just to go, let's say, to a concert venue or to a ball game or to a restaurant. So, you know, this is a whole new level of intrusion on privacy, because what we're talking about is something intimate to your personal, your physical body, you know, whether or not you've had a certain vaccine, so-called vaccine. I would say it's more gene therapy in the case of the COVID vaccine. But, you know, that's a very intimate question. And to say that you need to sort of walk around with proof that you've had this in order to engage, at least fully, in ordinary life is very different than saying, you know, hey, has your kid been vaccinated for polio or something 50 years ago? I mean, this strikes me as a new frontier. The other thing that's changed, David, is, you know, people say, well, but this is infectious, and so it's not just about you. We have to worry about other people. Well, yeah, there's some question marks there. Is it infectious if you're asymptomatic? There's no proof of that. Second of all, does the vaccine work? Because if it does, then people who have received the vaccine ought, at least presumably, not to be worrying too much about other people spreading it. And so you put all this together, all these question marks, and then consider that we're in a digital age. You know, that's very, very different today. Your vaccine records could now become, collected and placed online in a way that insurance companies could access them, in the way that government could access them, in the way that maybe even the public could access them. So this is a new frontier in terms of privacy. This is unprecedented, and I don't think we should call it anything other than unprecedented.
Yeah, sorry there. Jeff, do you think that that's going to be a part of normal life, or do you think there's going to be a lot of pushback on that?
Well, it's hard to say. I think there's a lot of quiet pushback out there. I think some of the loudest voices, in the popular press and on social media are saying, well, you have to do this. You live in a society, and you can't just go around infecting other people. And so we have a right to know your vaccine status. I would suspect that in a pure marketplace, this would be unpopular, and most people wouldn't want their local restaurant or whatever to impose it on them. But I think what's going to happen here is, with so many other parts of our life, social media, big corporations, is that there's going to be a nexus, a confluence of state power and private corporate power coming together to attempt to impose this stuff on us. So look, I at the moment it could go either way, but we've seen how people responded to COVID lockdowns, to business closures, to school closures, to sports closures, to mask mandates. So it wouldn't take much, I fear, to tip the American public in favor of this. Let's say another spike in COVID cases might be all it takes.
Yeah, you can imagine there's all kinds of, I guess, scenarios that could be rolled out to push this over the top and make it happen. But that would be something that we've never even had to think about in our time, is the idea of having a papers check to get into different things. The idea that you have to take an experimental drug with legal immunity to be able to leave your country. It feels like a prison, like a global prison. You know what I mean? Like, why do we have to be forced? I don't care if it's vitamin C. You know what I mean? Okay, we're going to have a health passport, and you must have Flintstone vitamins in your body, and you have to have proof of that in order to go to another country. That is, in and of itself, is disgusting. But it makes it even worse when it's something that is an experimental drug. Most of these things that they're wanting to attach to such a concept,
Yeah, it really is something else, because we've had dangerous strains of flu, basically throughout modern history. And we've had vaccines which have been pretty middling in their success against these flus. They're not, there's new strains constantly. They're always mutating. And so no one has ever suggested that you need flu vaccines to move around freely. Arguably, COVID is more deadly than ordinary flu, but honestly, the overall death numbers have not been that much higher in the last year in America, because we've had different a lot of deaths have been categorized as COVID, which might have been categorized some other way in the past. It's all very murky, and I think because it's murky, we have to sort of step back a little bit, David, and think about the principle involved, and say, what's the underlying principle? Is total safety the goal, and is it the role of government to pursue that goal, or is freedom the goal, and is the role of government to protect our freedom? I mean, I certainly am willing to go out and live my life and go places without a mask and to travel and do all those things, even in a world of COVID. I consider myself a relatively healthy guy. I certainly understand if someone who's older and maybe obese or has some pre-existing conditions doesn't want to do so. But that's, there are ways to handle this. And honestly, turning it into a political football is the worst possible outcome, because we're already so divided over Trump and over so many other things. This strikes me as a very mean-spirited contrivance, an attempt to beat Americans over the head and say there's only one way to look at this, and that's not true.
I saw a poll, and I don't have it quite on me at the moment, but you may have seen it too, where they were surveying different ages of Americans, and the ones who were the younger ones were the most terrified and anxious about the world. Did you see that?
Yeah, isn't that something? Because we know that for people under 40, maybe even under 50, but certainly for people under 40, this COVID virus is no more lethal than ordinary flu, and especially with younger people, it's actually statistically less lethal than ordinary flu. And no one's going around fearful for their lives over flu. And we've had basically 0 deaths among college students with COVID. In fact, we haven't had hardly any hospitalizations amongst college students with COVID. So it's clear, it is overwhelmingly clear that age and obesity are the 2 biggest cofactors in terms of serious complications, hospitalization, or even death from COVID. So, from this beginning, we should have been having young people out there doing the deliveries, getting the groceries, running the offices. So I think it shows perversely how much time young people spend online consuming sort of this hysterical content, and how much that begins to form their reality. Because if we step back, we know that in reality, their fears are almost entirely unjustified. So, but since the polling appears to tell us that they're the most concerned group of all, that just shows you that their lives have become so absorbed online that they're almost living in an alternative reality. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, and that's not good. I heard people comment saying, that young people are supposed to be the risk takers, and if they're crippled with paralyzing fear and anxiety, that doesn't bode well for the long-term maintenance of capital formation in society, does it?
No, we have a natural progression between younger and older generations, the way new people come up and develop at work, or use the capital that was already existing that previous generations have bequeathed to them. And the whole thing, to have the youngest people in society the most risk averse, strikes me as unprecedented. It strikes me as bizarre, and it strikes me as something that has happened because of, I think, social media primarily. That we live in these sort of self-selected echo chambers where we only consume the content which tends to confirm our worldview, and that we're raising a generation of individuals who just, don't perhaps care about launching into the world. So that very troubling, no question.
Yeah, and it's also they make a big deal about Generation Z being different from millennials, but I think they had a higher percentage polled of anxiety than the millennial age group. So we can only hope. I guess we'll have to look to the next generation, Jeff, the one after Generation Z. They call it Generation Alpha, the little babies right now. Maybe they'll have some guts. We can only hope, right? Where's the rebellious spirit, right, Jeff? Look. We rebel on all the wrong places, and we submit in all the wrong, it's amazing. We want to rebel about, hey, we're edgy. We're not going to allow Dr. Seuss. We're going to rebel against the past. but yet, there's no boldness for life. There's no vivaciousness,
Well, none of these mass mandates or lockdowns would have been possible without overwhelming acceptance and complicity on the part of the American people. They could end tomorrow. And to an extent,
do we have Jeff? Okay, let's see if we can get Jeff Deist back on. We're live on A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Granosky. We'll take a quick break and return in just a moment. More with Jeff Deist of the Mises Institute. You can follow him at Jeff Deist on Twitter, or go to Mises.org, Mises.org. Back in just a second. Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania Catania personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa.
Not attorney spokeswoman.
Neighbor's Choice is back. I'm your host, David Gronowski. We are live on radio. We were just speaking with Jeff Deist and his call dropped, so we're going to try to get him back on the program. I don't know if it was a battery issue or just a connection issue, but we'll try to connect back with him momentarily. I wanted to look at this story here on Mises.org. It says the property-based social order is being destroyed by central banks. And it's by Zachary Yost. It says, readers of the Mises Wire are no doubt familiar with the negative consequences of central banking and the inflationary capacity of fiat currency, and how such a system drives malinvestment and leads to boom-bust cycles. Not only does the business cycle lead to the misallocation of resources from their natural ends of the structure of production, but it also drives resources into financialization rather than the real economy. This financialization, which has been taking place since at least the First World War, has served over time to structurally undermine the morality of property in the eyes of the general public. As the increased popularity of socialism, at least in rhetorical terms among the youth, indicates, this evaporation of property may reach a critical mass within the not too distant future. So this is an interesting topic, and it's one that I think has some real, I guess you could say, urgency to consider whether this is a possibility, that people have really totally shredded a kind of moral respect for private property in this time. And that's one of the reasons why we're losing our society so fast. Is that's kind of a foundational principle to maintain, as I've talked about before on the program. The article goes on to say, hostility towards capitalism seems to be growing everywhere one looks. It's not surprising that envy-fueled leftists despise capitalism, but on the political right, more and more populists have taken to bashing capitalism and the market fundamentalists who are, supposedly running the GOP. Yet populist conservatives have so far seemingly failed to notice the way in which the Federal Reserve and our inflationary fiat currency have contributed to all of the social problems and ills that they are greatly concerned with. So, Jeff Deist, we have you back?
We do.
Good. Well, Jeff, I was just reading this story that I wanted you to comment on. The property-based social order is being destroyed by central banks, by Zachary Yost on your site. And, you know, I think this is something that needs to be talked about and understood more, that the Federal Reserve and these central planning mechanisms, they have an effect on morality and families, right? And it's kind of hard to make that case for some people, but it's pretty solid once you see it, right?
Absolutely. We need to be talking about economics and culture and economics and civilization. This isn't just sort of dry technical tinkering by the Fed or by our fiscal people at the Treasury or whatever. This stuff has deep ramifications and long-lasting effects on people. And so what the Fed basically does at the end of the day is enrich a class of people who are earlier to receive the money and credit they create. In other words, people who get it earlier in the process, and that includes Wall Street, for example. So what the Fed does under the guise of capitalism is it gives ammunition to the left to say that America's society is very unjust, that there's an undeserving class of rich people, and that, you know, there's these sort of capitalist fat cats who don't produce all that much value for society, but they make tons and tons of money, while here we've got school teachers struggling to make $40,000 a year. So in fact, there's some truth to that leftist critique. The problem is just that neither left nor right is looking at the Fed as a huge driver of inequality in society. Both of them are just sort of tone deaf. You know, the right thinks that money is something to be tinkered with, and the left thinks lots of money and cheap credit for poor people is a good thing. And so it really goes unremarked how much the Fed affects culture, because when the cost of money, when money is plentiful and the cost of borrowing money is cheap, I mean, apart from the potential inflationary effects of that, there's also a shift in people's mentality towards borrowing, towards consuming, as opposed to saving and living more frugally and putting money away for a rainy day or even better for future generations. And that shift, which really occurs in the United States maybe in the middle of the 20th century, is really profound, and it's going to have long-lasting implications. We ought to be thinking about it and talking about it more. And from our end, the Mises Institute, which is where the article you quoted, and we think there are real alternatives for how you can have money in society that holds value more responsibly, top to bottom. And that's something where economists don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about whether or not you should be married and productive and that sort of thing. They don't want to be judgmental, but these things are intertwined and we can't escape it.
I heard you in a recent interview, you were talking about this idea of fusionism. What is that? Do you see that that's a concept that is viable for the future?
Well, fusionism is an attempt to reconcile some of the differences between conservatives and what we might call classical liberals or libertarians. And this goes all the way back to like the 1950s. But there's also been some attempts to create a fusionist movement as recently as the early 90s. And so by fusionism, I mean sort of bringing together the things that the people on the right care about and things that libertarians care about, like free markets. And it's never been completely successful. There's always been divisions and rancor over foreign policy, over the role of social issues. But I think what we're starting to realize today is that the left is aggressive, the left is unhinged, and the left is out for blood. And so having a right or a libertarian movement that's full of factions and not very effective is maybe not the way to go.
Yeah, it seems to me that there's a time to debate small nuances, but when people are rapidly losing their minds on the left, the coalition of the vast majority of people that don't buy into the nonsense needs to get their act together and say, we've had enough of this stuff. But the problem is the tendency of politics is that you mirror your opponent. So the more power grabbing and centralized controlling the left becomes, it seems like the right wants to imitate that, and that just gets us nowhere.
Yeah, we become what we fear and criticize, and we see this all the time. And so there are people arguing that, hey, we shouldn't fall down to the tactics of the left. We shouldn't be canceling people. We shouldn't be going after corporations and trying to hurt them politically when they promote left-wing causes. We ought to be better than that. You know, we ought to be different. And then there's people who say, no. This is war. You have to roll up your sleeves, take the gloves off, and be every bit as willing as the left is to, use state power or whatever kind of power to impose yourself on the other side. So that's where we are today, I think.
Yeah, it reminds me of a saying that Rene Girard says. He said, be careful who your enemies are. You will become like them, And that's kind of a principle that you get fixated on trying to beat the other, and you end up becoming almost undifferentiated from your opponent. And but it's a principle of markets that differentiation is what allows you to stand out in the marketplace and make you an attractive proposal for people. If you look just like the exact same but just slightly off-brand, it's not really an easy selling point,
Yeah, it's a very tough time politically. It seems like the progressives are winning. It seems like they're sweeping things. And so really the opposition is more geographic these days than ideological. It's Ron DeSantis trying to have his own COVID rules in Florida, for example. I think that's where the action is, because we're really in almost a post-persuasion situation.
Yeah, and just today, more 2 or 3 big venture capital funds announced that they're moving to Miami. I saw that this week. So a lot of different capital and people, real estate market. I can't tell you how many people are here about moving into Florida left and right. It's a mass exodus, perhaps. I don't know. We'll continue to see what happens. Jeff, maybe you're going to get your wish and you're going to get a more decentralized country like you've always wanted, right?
Absolutely.
Well, very good. Thank you for joining us. And to continue following Jeff Deist, follow him at Jeff Deist on Twitter or go to Mises.org. I'm David Gronowski. Godspeed.